I was humiliated for years because of my skin, until a miracle silenced everyone. "You'll live like this forever," she said, but what God did proved otherwise. For years my life was defined by sideways glances, whispers in the hallways, and a mark on my face I never chose to carry. I tried everything to hide: creams, hair over my face, silences that screamed within. What I didn't know was that, amidst the shame and pain, an invisible force was already at work. Slowly my journey transformed into something even the doctors didn't expect. A silent path of faith, discoveries, and true healing. Today I no longer carry just the skin that once shamed me. I carry a living story of overcoming and purpose. Thank you for being here. Follow this journey to the end and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to know how far this message of hope will reach. The first day of school always came with a new weight in my chest, as if each year carried promises that were never fulfilled. I walked through the main school gate with my shoulders hunched, wishing I could be invisible. My hair was strategically loose, falling over the right side of my face, the marked side, the side that made people look away. My backpack seemed to weigh tons, not because of the books but because of the anxiety it hid. Every step was an effort to appear normal, as if that were possible for someone like me. Inside the classroom, the smiles among my classmates were like secret codes I was never part of. Some were already sharing vacation news, laughing at things I barely heard. I chose a desk in the back, my usual spot, near the wall and far from the window. I knew that there, at least, my left profile was more visible, the acceptable side. The teacher entered and greeted the class with forced cheer, as if pretending not to notice that some eyes were already turning towards me. I tried to focus on the blackboard, on the books, on the sound of the teacher's voice. But the hum of disguised laughter was louder than any explanation about equations. What I feared most was already happening. People were whispering. They pretended to whisper about something else, but I already knew that sound. It was always the same, with subtle variations of scorn and pity. Sometimes I wished they only felt contempt because at least it would be clearer. I took a deep breath, trying to be strong as I always did. I practiced a slight smile at the open notebook in front of me, as if it could comfort me. But a quick reflection in the window glass showed my face exposed for a second, and panic returned like a wave. I adjusted my hair again, feeling my hands tremble. Everyone's eyes were on me as always. Recess was always a minefield. I tried to leave the classroom before the crowd, but Mia always found a way to be nearby. She walked past me with a group of girls, laughing loudly at something that seemed to have my name embedded in the middle of the sentence. I didn't need to confirm it. Her gaze pierced me with a quiet malice, like someone who holds power and knows it. She pretended to bump into my shoulder and said, "Sorry, I didn't see you there, darkness." I swallowed hard. My face burned not just from the humiliation, but because everyone heard it. Some laughed, others looked at the floor. No one defended me. I went to the bathroom and locked myself in one of the stalls, trying to breathe. The mirror inside was unforgiving, so I turned my back. I wondered if I could ever walk through the hallways without wishing to disappear. My hands were sweating, my stomach ached. Everything seemed to confirm what I feared. I was the mistake everyone pointed out. In the next class, the teacher asked for a partner activity. I didn't even lift my eyes. I already knew no one would choose me. When she finally noticed my isolation, she paired me with Amelia, the quiet girl in the back row. She said nothing, just nodded her head. We worked together without exchanging a word. Deep down, I was grateful for that respectful silence. In the hallway, walking back from class, I heard another mocking voice say, "Has she tried to bleach it with bleach?" A burst of laughter erupted behind me. I pretended not to hear, walking with my eyes on the floor, as if my shoes were fascinating. Mia let out a little giggle that made my skin burn even more. Night arrived as a relief, but also as a reminder. The silence of my room always made the pain echo louder. I lay in bed, not wanting to eat dinner. My mother knocked on the door, asked if I wanted to talk, but I said I was tired. It was true, but in a way she wouldn't understand. The mirror in my room was covered with a sheet, my choice. I preferred to imagine what I looked like rather than face the reflection of rejection. I closed my eyes and, as I had been doing for some time, began a conversation that only I heard. "Hi God. It's me again," I whispered. I had no beautiful words, no strong faith, just the outpouring of someone who no longer knew what to ask for. I know there are people suffering more. But do you also see me, Lord? The ceiling seemed indifferent, just like the sky every time I cried alone. I felt small, invisible, a flawed piece in a world that only applauds perfection. My heart tightened remembering the doctor's words, cold and definitive. You'll live like this forever. They repeated like a cursed echo. I took a deep breath trying not to cry. But it was impossible. Silent tears streamed uncontrollably, wetting my pillow like so many other nights. And even without being sure that anyone was listening, I stayed there speaking softly to God. I told him I wanted to be different, not out of vanity but for relief. I just wanted to wake up one day and not be afraid of the mirror. I closed my eyes once more, surrendering everything to the darkness. Will I ever be beautiful without hiding? The next morning I expected more of the same. The sound of backpacks being thrown onto desks, the muffled laughter before the next provocation. I entered the classroom with my hair even more plastered to my face, like a shield. As I passed the back row, I heard a muffled comment. The Art of Camouflage Limited Edition. Followed by giggles. I pretended it wasn't about me. But everything was always about me. Amelia was sitting in the same spot as the day before. Her eyes followed me discreetly as I approached. There was something strange in that gaze. It wasn't mockery nor pity. It was something else. I sat at my desk and tried to feign normalcy, but she was still looking, with a calm that for some reason didn't irritate me. It was as if she saw something beyond the mark, something others didn't see. During recess, I sat on the bench near the garden. It was my refuge when the hallways became unbearable. From a distance, I saw Mia and her friends laughing loudly. They looked at their phones and then at me. I already knew another photo, another cruel montage. This time I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath and looked away. When I stood up to go back, I crossed paths with Amelia. She said nothing, just looked at me again, with that hard-to-decipher expression. But for an instant I felt something familiar in that silence, as if she understood. Her eyes held no pity. They held understanding. After science class, I needed to go to the bathroom to compose myself. The cold, white lights highlighted every feature of my face in the mirror. So I lowered my head. I quickly entered a stall, wanting only to hide for a few minutes. When I came out, I heard the door open. It was Amelia. She didn't see me immediately. She stopped in front of the mirror and began to retouch her makeup. I thought about leaving without her noticing my presence, but something made me stay. I watched as she applied concealer to the side of her face with meticulous delicacy. But what caught my attention was what was underneath. For a brief second, as the brush glided, an irregular spot appeared. Something that shouldn't have been there. My heart raced. She suddenly turned around, noticing my reflection behind her. Our eyes met. There was a heavy silence between us, full of meanings we couldn't name. She didn't try to hide what I saw. She just lowered her hand, as if giving up on disguising it. The makeup was no longer just an aesthetic habit. It was an armor, like my hair. She took a small step towards me, taking a deep breath. I said nothing, but I didn't look away. For the first time, the barrier between us seemed fragile. What was in the mirror was more than vanity. It was fear. That afternoon, Amelia asked me to talk behind the patio, where few students went. I was surprised, but I accepted. We sat under a tree where the sun filtered through the leaves. It took her a while to speak. What you saw today, it was true. Her voice was low, as if even the wind shouldn't hear. I waited without interrupting. I had the same condition as you. It started when I was 12. I spent hours trying to hide it, begging not to go to school. I had treatment for years, used everything they told me to, until the spots started to disappear. But the fear remained. Her voice trembled a little, but she kept her eyes fixed on mine. I felt every word as if it were my own. She explained how she learned to apply makeup perfectly, how she became an expert at hiding even from herself, and how the fear of it returning never left her. It's like I won, but never truly. Because every day I wake up afraid of the mirror. For the first time, I wasn't the only one with this pain. It squeezed my chest in a strange, almost sweet way. Her confession opened a space within me, a place where shame gave way to empathy. For the first time, someone didn't want to judge me or save me. They just wanted to share the burden. I am not alone in this. I never was. The doctor's office had that overly clean smell, as if they wanted to erase any sign of imperfection. I sat in the upholstered chair with my hands clasped in my lap, while Dr. Harper leafed through my file without looking into my eyes. She was always meticulous, cold, and direct. After a few minutes, she approached with a flashlight, examining my face with surgical precision. "The improvement is slight but constant," she said, like someone evaluating a statistic, not a person. She moved away, typing something on the computer. Then she printed a new prescription and placed it on the table. "You'll need to continue for another 6 months. Even if it seems to be improving, the condition is stubborn. It has unpredictable relapses." I took the prescription in silence, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Consistency is what guarantees results. If you stop, it could get even worse. I nodded, though my mind was distant. Her voice echoed like a sentence. Get even worse. I left the office with the bag of medications, but carrying much more than creams and pills. It was as if I had received confirmation that my face was a battlefield, and I, a tired soldier. In the car, my mother tried to start a conversation, but I just said everything was fine. It wasn't. That appointment had left me suffocated, as if hope were forbidden. If you stop, it could get even worse. That night, I stared at the bottles on my bedroom desk. One by one, as if they were relics of a silent war. I knew them by heart. The smell, the texture, the burning sensation they left in the first few minutes. It was like an automated routine. But something inside me was already starting to question everything. What if I didn't want to depend on this forever? What if there was another way? I closed my eyes for an instant and remembered my conversation with Amelia. She had improved, but still lived in fear. And me? Would I be willing to live in the shadow of a possible relapse just to avoid facing the mirror head-on? But then the doctor's voice came back forcefully. Without treatment, the skin gets worse. It was terrifying to think of everything falling apart. I no longer knew if my fear was of the disease or of failure. I picked up the main bottle and looked at the expiration date, as if that would tell me how much longer I would have peace. But what was peace after all? Something bought at a pharmacy? Or a miracle awaiting faith? My heart pounded. The conflict was no longer about spots, it was about control, about believing without guarantees. I took a deep breath, setting the bottle aside, still without an answer. Doubt grew even among silent prayers. Perhaps healing was near, or increasingly distant. What if she's right? What if I'm wrong about everything? That night I couldn't sleep. The doctor's words haunted me, but something inside me wanted to react differently this time. Not like before, when I just poured out my heart to God like throwing words to the wind. This time I wanted to be heard. I wanted him to see me. I knelt beside the bed, trembling. It wasn't my custom to do this, but something pushed me in that direction. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. God, I don't know if you're there. I don't know if you listen to people like me, full of doubts. I remained silent for a moment, trying to find courage in my own words. But if you are, if you really are, look at me. The room was dark, but it seemed fuller than ever. As if someone was there just waiting for me to speak. I touched my face with my fingertips, feeling the imperfections that had defined me for so many years. I just want to wake up one day and not have to hide who I am. I don't want to hate myself in the mirror anymore. Or run from people's touch. My voice faltered, but I continued. I'm tired of all of this, and I need help. Real help. Still kneeling, I let a tear fall onto the sheet. It was all I had. My pain, my wavering faith, and the desire to be loved as I am. God, if you truly hear me, listen to this. In the following weeks, I noticed a slight change in the mirror. Small patches of skin were clearer, less inflamed, almost as if they were trying to breathe on their own. It wasn't a miraculous transformation, but enough to make me pause for a few seconds before covering my face. The desire to believe that something was changing grew, but so did doubt. I didn't know if it was the medicine, or if it was God. Even with the improvement, I still entered the classroom with my eyes on the floor. My hair still fell strategically over the right side, as if any slip could reveal too much. People didn't seem to notice the difference, or perhaps they simply didn't care. And that, in a way, hurt more. I wanted to be seen but not observed. I wanted to be recognized but not analyzed. At home, my mother smiled, seeing the positive signs. "We're on the right track, daughter," she said with a touch of hope in her voice. I just nodded, not daring to tell her that my prayer still echoed night after night. Something inside me deeply desired that the improvement wasn't just physical. I needed something more. Something permanent. But whenever the mirror showed me an improved reflection, an intrusive thought reached me. What if this is only temporary? I returned to Dr. Harper's office at the end of that month. She examined my skin with the same impersonal expression as always, like someone evaluating a flawed piece of pottery. "It's visibly better," she said without emotion. She typed on the computer for a few minutes and then looked at me seriously. "But don't be fooled by it. The condition can return at any moment." She handed me another prescription for another 6 months of treatment. "You need to understand, Isabella. It's not something that disappears. It's something you control." Her words cut like cold blades, even though they were spoken calmly. "The biggest mistake would be to stop now. Without the medicine, your skin will react. It will get worse." I took a deep breath but couldn't say anything. I just took the prescription with trembling hands. As she spoke, something in me began to close off. As if her words were sealing a destiny I refused to choose. The idea of depending on a product for the rest of my life filled me with anguish. It was like living under house arrest with permission to leave only if medicated. I felt my heart beat faster. I couldn't accept that sentence without a fight. Before leaving, she repeated, looking directly into my eyes. "You will live like this forever, remember that." I arrived home with heavy shoulders. I went straight to my room, but as I passed the living room, my father called me with his calm voice. "Isabella, come here for a minute." I sat on the sofa, still holding the prescription as if it were a condemnation. He noticed my state and waited patiently until I started to speak. I told him about the appointment, about the doctor's prognosis, and about the fear growing inside me. He listened in silence with serene eyes and a face full of empathy. When I finished, he leaned forward and took my hand. "Daughter, there are things that science explains, and others that only faith can reach." I made an effort to hold back tears. He continued, "You can do what the doctors say, of course, but you can also ask for something more. Something no medicine offers." I remained quiet, absorbing every word as if they were balm for my weary soul. Miracles don't follow medical logic, Isabella. They follow the heart of those who believe. Hearing that calmed me in a way that neither creams nor diagnoses had managed to do. For a moment I felt less alone in the battle, more supported. He smiled slightly and said something that resonated in my mind for hours. "Miracles happen, but first you need to believe in them." The last bottle was almost empty. I felt a tightening in my chest as I pressed the pump and applied the thin layer to my skin. It was a mechanical gesture I had performed for months, but that day it felt different. There was a silent solemnity in that instant, as if somehow I was closing a cycle, perhaps of treatment, perhaps of fear. The packaging fell lightly into the sink, but the weight inside me was immense. I put the bottle at the back of the drawer, next to the other empty ones, like relics of a battle that had lasted too long. I looked at my reflection and noticed that my skin was clearer, calmer. But what moved me wasn't the visible progress. It was the courage that was beginning to sprout within me. There was no longer certainty, only decision. A choice that didn't come from logic but from the soul. My mother watched me from the hallway in silence. I said nothing, just smiled slightly as if to say, "It's okay." That night I closed the drawer and sat on the edge of the bed, feeling a chill that didn't come from the weather, but from the unknown. I knew I was crossing an invisible line. Point of no return. I touched my face carefully and whispered softly, just to myself. That was the last application. I decided. I turned off the bedroom light and knelt as I had done so many times in recent months. But that night, my words would not be laments but a declaration. With my eyes closed, I gently touched my skin and said firmly, "My God, may my skin become as healthy as the skin on my hand. May my skin remain permanently healthy after the treatment." I felt a sudden peace invade the room. Then, I recited the prayer that had accompanied me since childhood. But now, each sentence was loaded with new weight, a new purpose. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." The words flowed with a strength that didn't come from memory, but from surrender. It was as if my voice echoed beyond the walls. a request, an offering, a vow. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. My faith trembled but did not retreat. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Those words confronted me. I thought of Mia, of all who had hurt me, and I let, in that instant, forgiveness begin within me. It was part of the healing too. But deliver us from evil. Amen. When I stood up, I felt that something had been delivered. Something I no longer had to carry alone. I never want to depend on this again. The following days came with silent tension. I would wake up and run to the mirror before anything else, looking for signs of relapse. Every inch of skin was examined with a mix of hope and terror. But what I found was stability. Nothing worsened. Nothing returned. And that, in itself, was a miracle in my eyes. The bottle remained in the drawer. Intact. At school I maintained my routine. My hair still fell over the right side, but it was no longer a shield, it was habit. I began to notice that my attention was less focused on the judgment of others. There were days when I caught myself smiling alone, for no apparent reason, as if something within me was silently realigning. There was still fear, of course, but it no longer commanded my steps. Sometimes my mother looked at me with gentle suspicion. Are you sure you don't want to reapply? I smiled and said, I want to see how far I can go. She didn't insist, just gave me a kiss on the forehead and respected my time. And my father, with that look of silent faith, just said, continue. Every day without the medicine was a small victory. But deep down I knew, I'm either about to witness a miracle or a disaster. At lunchtime I noticed the cell phones in hand, the disguised smiles, and the glances crossing the cafeteria like silent arrows. I didn't understand immediately, until a girl from class showed me the screen with hesitation. It was an old photo of me, taken during one of my worst skin flare-ups. The image was in a school group with a cruel caption, "Transformation or illusion?" My stomach churned. The marks were stronger in that photo, captured under harsh light and an unforgiving angle. It was as if someone had saved that moment, waiting for the right day to destroy any sign of progress. The comments below cut through me like knives. Does she think she's fooling anyone? Faith Photoshop? And others I preferred not to read to the end. My face burned even without a fever. For a second I felt the old wave of panic forming. The desire to run, to disappear, to cry in silence. I closed my eyes for an instant, wishing the world would stop. But it didn't stop. It stayed there, pushing me towards the usual reaction. I took a deep breath, a very deep breath. And when I opened my eyes, something was different. The pain was real, but the response within me was no longer the same. Everyone is laughing again. I walked down the hallway as if the floor still accepted me. I didn't lower my gaze. I didn't feign strength, but I also didn't succumb to humiliation. An unexpected serenity enveloped me. Perhaps because I knew that photo was from the past, and the past, though it hurts, doesn't have to command the present. I was no longer that girl, even if everyone still wanted to see me that way. I returned to the classroom and sat at my desk as usual. The silence around was thick, heavy, waiting for a scandalous reaction or tears. But there was none of that in me. Only a certainty. My dignity was not in that image. No one could send me back to what I was because something had already changed inside. And that's what mattered now. The teacher came in, interrupting the general embarrassment, and I calmly began to copy the lesson. My fingers trembled slightly, but I continued. Mia watched me, perhaps expecting a meltdown. She wouldn't get that spectacle. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I was respecting myself. And that, I realized, was a kind of strength no one could steal. The laughter diminished over time. Perhaps out of disappointment. Perhaps out of fear. But this time, something in me didn't break. At the end of the day, as I was packing my things, Amelia approached. Her gaze was firm, and there was something different in her posture. She turned to the group that was still whispering and said clearly, "Have you looked in the mirror today? Or do you prefer to point fingers because it's easier than dealing with your own flaws?" The room fell silent. No one answered. Everyone pretended to be busy, but they knew. Something had been exposed there. She turned to me and lightly touched my shoulder. "You are not alone, Isabella. You never were." That disarmed me. Her words came in like a balm to the cracks that still resisted in me. For the first time, someone defended me in public. And more than that, she did it truthfully, without seeking a stage, without expecting applause. Just out of empathy. On the way home we walked side by side. We didn't talk much. But the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was comforting. I knew Amelia carried old pains, and now she knew mine were still healing. It was a pact without promises, without explanations. Just presence. The group, the school, the mirror. Everything seemed lighter that day. Because there was an alliance now, built in the midst of pain. Perhaps healing begins from the inside out. I woke up with the sun streaming through the curtain gaps, like a gentle invitation to start the day. I walked to the mirror without expectation, just out of habit. That's when I stopped. I looked again. And once more. The left side of my face, where the spots always lingered, was clear. Not partially. Not recovering. Clear. Smooth like the skin I imagined in my most hidden dreams. My heart raced. I touched my face carefully, almost fearing that the reflection was a lie. But the touch confirmed what my eyes saw. There was no roughness, no inflammation, no sign of what had accompanied me for years. No. I whispered. This can't be real. My eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of disbelief and hope. I sat on the edge of the bed trying to understand. I hadn't used any cream for weeks. I hadn't done any new treatments. Only prayers. Only faith, however fragile. Could this really be possible? What if it was the beginning of something bigger? Or was it just a truce before the storm returned? I looked again, trying to find flaws, trying to doubt what I saw. But the mirror insisted on the truth. No, this can't be real. Each subsequent morning became a new check. I looked at myself cautiously, expecting the return of the spots, a flaw, a sign that everything was just a passing illusion. But there was no regression. On the contrary, new parts of my face were visibly clearer. My skin seemed alive, uniform, as if it was rebuilding itself with patience and silence. I didn't want to believe too soon, but I couldn't ignore what I saw. I started to avoid the school mirror, still insecure about what others thought. But at home, in front of my reflection, there was a different dialogue. I looked at myself and asked, why now? And more deeply, why me? The answer didn't come in words, but in peace. As if the miracle was happening from the inside out, without fanfare, without haste. My mother noticed something but didn't comment. Perhaps out of fear of pressuring me. Perhaps thinking it was a delayed effect of the medicine. I let the silence work in my favor. Something in me wanted to keep this secret just a little longer. Like a treasure not yet ready to be exposed. Like a fragile bud before it blooms. My skin continued to clear. Days passed. And there was no pain, inflammation, or shadow of return. No adverse reactions. No regression. At school I maintained my routine. My hair still fell over the right side, but it was no longer a shield, it was habit. I began to notice that my attention was less focused on the judgment of others. There were days when I caught myself smiling alone, for no apparent reason. As if something within me was silently realigning. There was still fear, of course. But it no longer commanded my steps. Sometimes my mother looked at me with gentle suspicion. Are you sure you don't want to reapply? I smiled and said, I want to see how far I can go. She didn't insist, just gave me a kiss on the forehead and respected my time. And my father, with that look of silent faith, just said, continue. Every day without the medicine was a small victory. But deep down I knew. I'm either about to witness a miracle or a disaster. At lunchtime I noticed the cell phones in hand, the disguised smiles, and the glances crossing the cafeteria like silent arrows. I didn't understand immediately, until a girl from class showed me the screen with hesitation. It was an old photo of me, taken during one of my worst skin flare-ups. The image was in a school group with a cruel caption. Transformation or illusion? My stomach churned. The marks were stronger in that photo, captured under harsh light and an unforgiving angle. It was as if someone had saved that moment, waiting for the right day to destroy any sign of progress. The comments below cut through me like knives. Does she think she's fooling anyone? Faith Photoshop? And others I preferred not to read to the end. My face burned even without a fever. For a second I felt the old wave of panic forming. The desire to run, to disappear, to cry in silence. I closed my eyes for an instant, wishing the world would stop. But it didn't stop. It stayed there, pushing me towards the usual reaction. I took a deep breath, a very deep breath. And when I opened my eyes, something was different. The pain was real. But the response within me was no longer the same. Everyone is laughing again. I walked down the hallway as if the floor still accepted me. I didn't lower my gaze. I didn't feign strength, but I also didn't succumb to humiliation. An unexpected serenity enveloped me. Perhaps because I knew that photo was from the past, and the past, though it hurts, doesn't have to command the present. I was no longer that girl, even if everyone still wanted to see me that way. I returned to the classroom and sat at my desk as usual. The silence around was thick, heavy, waiting for a scandalous reaction or tears. But there was none of that in me. Only a certainty. My dignity was not in that image. No one could send me back to what I was because something had already changed inside. And that's what mattered now. The teacher came in, interrupting the general embarrassment, and I calmly began to copy the lesson. My fingers trembled slightly, but I continued. Mia watched me, perhaps expecting a meltdown. She wouldn't get that spectacle. For the first time, I wasn't defending myself. I was respecting myself. And that, I realized, was a kind of strength no one could steal. The laughter diminished over time. Perhaps out of disappointment. Perhaps out of fear. But this time, something in me didn't break. At the end of the day, as I was packing my things, Amelia approached. Her gaze was firm, and there was something different in her posture. She turned to the group that was still whispering and said clearly, "Have you looked in the mirror today? Or do you prefer to point fingers because it's easier than dealing with your own flaws?" The room fell silent. No one answered. Everyone pretended to be busy, but they knew. Something had been exposed there. She turned to me and lightly touched my shoulder. "You are not alone, Isabella. You never were." That disarmed me. Her words came in like a balm to the cracks that still resisted in me. For the first time, someone defended me in public. And more than that, she did it truthfully, without seeking a stage, without expecting applause. Just out of empathy. On the way home, we walked side by side. We didn't talk much. But the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was comforting. I knew Amelia carried old pains, and now she knew mine were still healing. It was a pact without promises, without explanations. Just presence. The group, the school, the mirror. Everything seemed lighter that day. Because there was an alliance now, built in the midst of pain. Perhaps healing begins from the inside out. I woke up with the sun streaming through the curtain gaps, like a gentle invitation to start the day. I walked to the mirror without expectation, just out of habit. That's when I stopped. I looked again. And once more. The left side of my face, where the spots always lingered, was clear. Not partially. Not recovering. Clear. Smooth like the skin I imagined in my most hidden dreams. My heart raced. I touched my face carefully, almost fearing that the reflection was a lie. But the touch confirmed what my eyes saw. There was no roughness, no inflammation, no sign of what had accompanied me for years. "No," I whispered. "This can't be real." My eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of disbelief and hope. I sat on the edge of the bed trying to understand. I hadn't used any cream for weeks. I hadn't done any new treatments. Only prayers. Only faith, however fragile. Could this really be possible? What if it was the beginning of something bigger? Or was it just a truce before the storm returned? I looked again, trying to find flaws, trying to doubt what I saw. But the mirror insisted on the truth. No, this can't be real. Each subsequent morning became a new check. I looked at myself cautiously, expecting the return of the spots, a flaw, a sign that everything was just a passing illusion. But there was no regression. On the contrary, new parts of my face were visibly clearer. My skin seemed alive, uniform, as if it was rebuilding itself with patience and silence. I didn't want to believe too soon, but I couldn't ignore what I saw. I started to avoid the school mirror, still insecure about what others thought. But at home, in front of my reflection, there was a different dialogue. I looked at myself and asked, "Why now?" And more deeply, "Why me?" The answer didn't come in words, but in peace. As if the miracle was happening from the inside out, without fanfare, without haste. My mother noticed something but didn't comment. Perhaps out of fear of pressuring me. perhaps thinking it was a delayed effect of the medicine. I let the silence work in my favor. Something in me wanted to keep this secret just a little longer. Like a treasure not yet ready to be exposed. Like a fragile bud before it blooms. My skin continued to clear. Days passed. And there was no pain, inflammation, or shadow of return. No adverse reactions. No regression. Knowing that something extraordinary was happening inside me, and keeping it a secret was almost impossible. But I needed this time. I needed to understand, absorb, confirm. To tell before its time would be to expose a miracle to judgment, and I wasn't ready for that. At school, I continued to act as always, discreet with my hair falling gently over my face, even though I no longer needed to hide so much. Amelia, as observant as ever, seemed to notice. Her eyes rested on me more often, as if she sensed something. But she didn't ask. She just stayed nearby like a silent sentinel. Sometimes she smiled slightly, like someone who knew something good was coming. I was grateful for that silence. It was my protection while the truth matured within me. At home, I started to keep small notes about the progress. Marks that once dominated my face were now faint memories. My skin was different, but even more, the way I saw myself was different. Something new was growing in me. Not just beauty but confidence. Faith perhaps. And that faith needed to be carefully protected. It wasn't time to tell yet. I knew that. Because a miracle isn't shared in a hurry. It reveals itself when it matures. I need certainty before telling the world. On Monday, the cafeteria seemed quieter than usual. The reason revealed itself as soon as Mia walked in. Her hair was carelessly tied back, her eyes hidden behind sunglasses, and her face, partially covered by a fabric mask, the kind no one used anymore since the pandemic ended. It was impossible not to notice the tension in her steps. Even her friends seemed uncomfortable. Deep down, a cruel curiosity hung in the air. Some whispered. Others speculated. But what no one dared to say out loud was plastered in the collective gaze. Something was wrong with Mia. Later, in the bathroom, I heard two girls commenting that she had something ugly on her face, like reddish spots and eruptions. The image struck me strangely, not with pleasure but with disconcerting empathy. During class, Mia didn't lift her eyes once. She didn't mock anyone, didn't murmur ironies, didn't try to draw attention. It was as if she had disappeared, even though she was present. At the end of the day, before leaving, I saw her standing in front of the hallway mirror, motionless, observing her image like someone facing an unknown enemy. And then I realized, she can't even face the mirror. The next morning, I found a folded note inside my pencil case. The handwriting was neat but hesitant. Meet me behind the gym during the second break. Please. Mia. I froze. It seemed like a prank, a trap, a poorly disguised irony. But there was something in the way "please" was written that made me reconsider. When the bell rang, I went there, my heart racing. She was already waiting, alone with her hood covering part of her face. When she saw me, she took 2 steps back as if regretting it. But she didn't run. We stood in silence for a few seconds until she finally spoke. I don't know where to start. Her voice didn't have the sarcastic tone from before. It was hoarse, low, vulnerable. That caught me off guard. Mia lowered her hood and took off her glasses. The spots were there, visible, red, painful even to look at. It started out of nowhere. I tried everything. Creams, compresses. Nothing works. She took a deep breath. You've got better. Everyone noticed, even if you think they didn't. She avoided my gaze, as if asking for help was the ultimate humiliation. Please, tell me what you did. I remained silent. Part of me wanted to protect myself. The other wanted to reach out. Please, tell me what you did. My first impulse was to recoil. I remembered every word she used to hurt me, every mocking laugh, every cruel silence when I needed it most. But then I looked at her again, and I saw something I never imagined seeing in Mia. Fear. Not the fear of losing status or beauty, but the fear of herself, of what pain could do to someone. And that's what broke me inside. I took a deep breath, trying to organize the confusion in my chest. I can tell you, Mia, but it's not something you find in a pharmacy. She frowned, still not understanding. It's not a product secret. Something different. It's faith. She seemed suspicious, almost laughed, but controlled the impulse. For the first time I heard in her voice. Then tell me. I'll listen. I wanted to make sure she wouldn't mock, wouldn't distort. If I tell you, do you promise to take it seriously? She nodded, though hesitantly. I promise. I can't stand waking up like this anymore. I didn't think it would be so difficult. Until it happened to me. Her words disarmed me more than any tear could. I approached her calmly. Something bigger was forming in that instant. But first, you need to truly listen to me. That morning, the teacher announced that some students would give free presentations about significant personal experiences. My heart raced. I knew it was time. I asked to speak. The room fell silent when I stood up. The walk to the front seemed longer than usual. I faced faces that had hurt me for years, and now for the first time I stood before them whole. My name is Isabella Cook, and for a long time my face was the first thing that spoke for me. Before my voice, my story, my heart. The words came out trembling but firm. For years I tried to hide. Out of shame. Out of fear. Out of pain. The class listened. Even Mia in the back of the room with her eyes fixed on me. I continued. I did treatments, yes. I used everything the doctors gave me. But nothing healed me like what I found at night, kneeling beside my bed. I paused. It wasn't a cream, nor a magic formula. It was a conversation. A small faith but sincere. I saw some eyes well up. Even the teacher shifted in her chair, moved. I held the microphone more firmly, feeling the truth overflowing from me. I didn't come to talk about medicines. I came to talk about faith. When I finished speaking, the silence was thick. Not of judgment but of impact. No one knew how to react immediately. Then slowly hands began to rise. Isabella, I'm sorry for laughing at you that day in the hallway. It was a timid voice, coming from someone who never spoke up. Me too, another said with tear-filled eyes. Words of apology began to come like a fine rain. Each apology was like a point of light igniting within me. The girl who once wanted to disappear was now heard. Valid. Respected. Mia, standing in the back of the room, remained silent, but her eyes spoke for her. There was no longer irony in them, there was regret. And perhaps admiration. It was a moment I didn't ask for, but that God wrote with delicacy. The teacher stood up, discreetly wiping a tear. Isabella, thank you for your courage. You reminded us of what truly matters. This wasn't just about skin. It was about humanity, empathy, transformation. A collective healing, initiated by the faith of a girl who had already lost almost everything. Except hope. There, before those eyes, I understood. My story could heal other stories. Their words, for the first time, healed. Arriving home that day, I rushed to my room and stood in front of the mirror. But this time not with fear. I looked at myself calmly, like meeting an old friend. I touched my face gently. It was clean, even smooth. But what moved me most was something else. I saw myself whole. For the first time, the reflection didn't carry shame. It carried pride. I sat on the bed with a light heart. The memories of pain were still there, but they had lost their weight. Now they were parts of a journey that shaped me, that strengthened me. I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, asking for nothing, just thanking, for being heard, for being transformed, for being healed within before being healed without. My mother came into the room, saw my illuminated face and just smiled. You are beautiful, she said with shining eyes. But I knew it wasn't just my face. It was my soul. My father appeared soon after and hugged me without saying a word. Sometimes the deepest love is that which needs no sound. And as I looked at myself in the mirror once more, something surprised me deeply. Now even my internal scar began to fade. It was my mother's idea. Why don't your story with those who truly need to hear it? First I hesitated. I didn't know if I was ready to revisit everything. But I soon realized that healing wasn't forgetting. It was transforming pain into a bridge. That's how I met the group. Teenagers of different ages, each with a visible mark on their body, and an invisible one on their soul. I entered the room with an open heart and sweaty hands. The first meetings were silent, timid. But little by little each face revealed itself. A girl with alopecia, a boy with vitiligo, another with burn scars. There were no judgments there, only listening. Each story resonated with me like an echo of my own. I wasn't a counselor, nor an example. I was just another survivor trying to make sense of my own journey. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't need to think much. The words came out naturally. I told them about the mirror, the pain, the prayers, and the miracle. There was no forced emotion, just attentive eyes, some tearful, and a silent identification. It was as if, by sharing, I was clearing the ground for others to walk on too. Gradually, I understood that this place was more than a group. It was a refuge. There, every face had a story similar to mine. In the third week, when I entered the room, I saw a familiar figure sitting in the corner. Mia. Hair tied back, face clean, no makeup. She was thinner, quieter, more human. She didn't look directly at me, but her body conveyed something new, humility. She sat among the others as if she didn't want to stand out, nor be pitied. Just a place where she could breathe. I waited for her to speak, but on that first day she just listened. Her eyes filled with discreet tears at times, but she quickly wiped them away. It was strange to see her there, among the vulnerable, after so long occupying the top of the social walls. But at the same time it was comforting. There was sincerity in her silence. At the end of the session, our eyes met for an instant. And for the first time she smiled without armor. A timid, real smile. There were no words, just a slight nod as if to say, "Thank you for standing up, because now I can try too." That gesture was worth more than 1,000 apologies. I went home with a warm heart. Some transformations don't make noise, they whisper. And that day, Mia's silence said it all. This time, she didn't come as an enemy. Over time, I realized that my testimony wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of others. Each teenager who was moved, each silent tear, each grateful look showed me that my miracle wasn't a personal achievement. It was a mission. God didn't heal me just so I could live in peace, but so I could help others find that path too. Going back to the past hurts, but now it hurts in a different way. It's no longer a wound. It's a redemptive memory. I learned that there is no wasted pain when it's put at the service of empathy. Every sentence I share with the group comes from the most sincere part of me. And every response I receive shows me that the world needs more real stories, told with courage. The mirror today is my ally. I look at myself with love, with pride, with truth. I see marks that are gone and others that remained, but which now tell a different story. That of someone who didn't give up. The girl who once hid behind her hair now walks with her head held high, not because she won alone, but because she was sustained by something greater. Now my voice no longer trembles. It has purpose, because the miracle that silenced me now makes me speak. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you experienced anything similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the final screen that you'll also like, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.